to another great episode of the Bourbon Road with your hosts, Jim and Brian, where they talk bourbon and, of course, drink bourbon. Grab yourself a pour, kick back, and enjoy another trip down the Bourbon Road.
We are excited to have back once again for 2023 our sponsor, Seldom Seen Farms, with their bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup. Kevin and his staff there do a wonderful job. We're excited to have them sign on again this year to support the Bourbon Road, and we love their product. And with it being Christmas season, we hope our listeners will visit seldomseenmaple.com and check out all they have to offer. A lot of great gifts there. Bourbon aged maple syrup, bourbon barrel aged coffee, Rickhouse Reserve barbecue sauce. You can buy it by the bottle, you can buy it by the case, you can even get bourbon maple candle, and they even have maple cotton candy. Definitely check out seldomseenmaple.com. Support our sponsors, support Kevin and his family there. They have a 5,000 maple tap operation in Ohio, and they're doing it right. They don't just produce maple syrup. They're also bourbon enthusiasts, and we love them to death. Again, go check out seldomseenmaple.com. Kevin and his staff will take care of you. Welcome back for another edition of the Bourbon Road, a new podcast episode. I'm Jim Shannon, your host, and with me today is Brian Hyatt, our co-host. We're getting ready to have a really good time at the Bourbon Road Bar today. What do you think, Brian?
Yes, I'm very excited about today. We're going to be talking about some really cool products here, and super excited to learn a lot more about this.
We've got a guest with us today. We've got Lee Tatum with us. He's from Innerstave. Lee, welcome to the Bourbon Road.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm excited to hang out with you guys at the bar for a while.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We actually have kind of more than just us. We've got a few extra folks down here with us hanging out and drinking a little bourbon today. So this is kind of a party around a podcast episode. We do like to share a little bourbon amongst friends, and we do have some friends down here today. So Lee, it's great to have you join into our fun, and we're excited to hear about your product. I was blown away when I heard about it, but I think our listeners are going to be just so much more excited when they hear what you do. But before we get to it, we always like to get kind of straight to the whiskey first, if that's okay with you. And today we're going to have the Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, just the straight white label Evan Williams. It's a great pour. It's a value buy. What do you think, Brian?
I think it's definitely a good value buy. No doubt about it.
And our listeners are pretty educated. They know what a bottle and bond whiskey is, but we'll go over it for anybody who's not familiar. Bottle and bond basically means it's at least 4 years old. It's 100 proof. It was made in a single distilling season by a single master distiller, and it was aged in a bonded warehouse. So basically, it's just a sign of quality. If you see bottle and bond on a label of bourbon, or on a label of any whiskey for that matter, you can pretty much expect to get good quality whiskey. So with that said, what do you guys say we check out this Evan Williams Bottled and Bond 100 proof white label straight bourbon whiskey? Now, Brian, we had some JTS Brown on a couple of weeks back, and it's different. It's another Bottled and Bond whiskey. It's definitely different. This one's a little bit lighter, and it's got a little bit more like a nutty character to it, I think, than the JTS Brown. Lee, has it been a while since you had this one?
It has been. I grew up with Old Forester Bottle and Bond, so that's one I've kind of spent a lot of time with over the years. But it's been a while since I've had this. It's got a great nose.
It does. Well, it's a good bargain at or around $20 for a bottle. You can't beat it. Every now and then we do like to bring sort of a standard edition whiskey on the show, something that people can, get without hunting too much, something that's going to be good quality, something you don't mind making a cocktail or a highball out of. This is certainly one of them. I always get a little bit of almond on this. It's kind of a nutty
I would agree with that. Definitely compared to JTS Brown, a lot more of the nutty flavor, nutty nose off of that than what you get with JTS. No doubt.
I think JTS Brown was a little bit darker and deeper, right? A little bit more rich, but we've got a surprise there for everybody in the second half. So there's a method to our madness here, Lee. There's a reason we're drinking this whiskey, and we'll get into it later. But for right now, why don't we take a sip and just get on with the show? What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Wow, that's just tasty whiskey. This is not anything that's going to blow you out of the water, right? 4-year-old or plus a little bit, I would say. It's got the standard caramel and vanilla notes. Got a little bit of that nutty character from Heaven Hill. And daggone it, you can find it on the shelf when you want it for $20. That's awesome.
That definitely makes things a lot better when you know it's something that you can talk about, you can go grab. And they always make great stocking stuffers or good gifts to give folks. You know, these are really good bottles to get.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, we got you hooked. We got you drinking your bourbon. You're sitting back, you're relaxing, you're enjoying the show. Lee, why don't you tell us a little bit about who Innerstave is and who you are, and how you two got together. How did Innerstave and Lee Tatum get hooked up?
Yeah, absolutely. My road to Innerstave is a pretty strange one, actually. And I would say 14 months ago, if you asked if I was going to be in this kind of innovation around bourbon and rye and other spirits, I would have said, that seems pretty crazy to me. I've spent 30 years in the wine and spirits business. I went to a little college, Center College down in Danville, Kentucky, and then went to the University of Kentucky Patterson School for diplomacy. And I thought I was going to go off to the Foreign Service and travel the world living in embassies. And instead, I've been in the wine and spirits industry for 30 years. So you never know how things are going to work out. I tell my 24-year-old daughter, make a plan, but be ready that plan might not be the actual plan when you get through life. But I was a wine and spirits distributor first, spent a little time at an ad agency, and then spent 23 years at Brown-Forman. So, Brown-Forman owns their own mills and owns their own cooperages. And so much of the story about all of their bourbons is about oak barrels.
Sure.
I mean, it's totally about the barrel. You get 100% of the color, 90% of the flavor comes from the barrel. And so that's just what I was raised on. That's what I always knew. And while I went back and forth between wine and spirits, I spent a lot of time in new product development. So I worked a lot on innovation. My last role at Brown-Forman, we created Slane Irish whiskey, built a $35 million distillery over in Ireland. We came up with a brand I hope you love, King of Kentucky, which is, unlike Evan Williams, is a little bit more tough to find and at a much higher price point.
Well, I will say I have a bottle of Slane, but I don't have the King of Kentucky.
Yeah, King of Kentucky is a little bit tougher to get your hands on. And Cooper's Craft, which was Brown-Forman's first new bourbon that we came out with in 2015. That was the first one since Woodford Reserve in 1996. So they went a long time before coming out with a new bourbon brand. I managed all those projects. And after I left Brown-Forman at the beginning of 2019, I happened to jump on board with Kentucky Owl. And Kentucky Owl, my good friend Dixon Dedman was there. He founded the brand, sold it to Stoli Group. And so we ended up in that organization, which is run by a Russian oligarch, and spent some time there and really enjoyed working with Dixon and working with the Kentucky Owl team, and got to love that great bourbon. And I left there sort of midway 2020 through COVID, and I happened to run in randomly to a buddy of mine who I hadn't seen in 15 years, a guy I'd worked with back in the wine group days at Brown-Forman, long time ago. And he said, hey, I'm running this company in Napa called Innerstave. And I said, well, what's that? I have no idea what Innerstave is. And he said, well, we make barrel alternative oak. And I paused for a little bit and I said, well, I don't really know what that is.
That's a new term to me, right?
Yeah. What is that? So he said, well, next week, get on a plane, come out to Napa. Let me show you what we're up to. We've been in the wine business for 40 years. And he said they were ready to really, move into the spirits business, but they needed somebody not in Napa. They needed somebody closer to the heart of what's going on in distilling. And so being from Louisville, it turned into kind of a perfect partnership for me to join forces with him. It's Steve Dorfman. Shout out to him. He's a dear friend as well as my boss. But we've really enjoyed, this year that I've come on board and started working with distillers and crafting new finishing opportunities, as well as just maturation in general for bourbon, rye, tequila, rum, you name it. We stay away from the white goods other than tequila, obviously, because vodka doesn't need any oak aging, and some gins do it, but not many.
Yeah, I've had a few barrel-aged gins that I really liked. Yeah, I don't see the point in vodka at all.
No.
I mean, not that I don't drink vodka from time to time, but I don't see the point in putting it to wood. But certainly secondary finishes have become something that is just, it's kind of exploded over the past few years. At first, it was kind of a no-no with bourbon, right? So don't do that. You're messing with perfection already, right? But I think we're well past that.
We're way past it. And before we jump into the finishing, to tell you what Innerstave is in a nutshell, we do not make barrels. I get calls 4 days a week from people looking for barrels, and we don't make barrels. We source our wood from Missouri and central France. It gets shipped to Napa. It ages for 2 to 3 years, and you've got this beautiful microclimate where it's very warm in the day and very cool in the evenings. So we'll season it there for 3 years, 2 to 3 years. We have our own mill. We can make any size piece of wood, basically, from large staves that go into big wine vats to smaller staves that'll fit into barrels to cubes, blocks, chips, all the way down to micronized oak, which is almost smaller than sand. It is smaller than sand. It's micronized. You kind of get it based on the name.
So it's like a wood powder.
It's a wood powder.
Yeah,
definitely. And so it's been around the wine business a long time, 40 years. Winemakers, for example, for you guys, if you're making a $10 Cabernet or Merlot, whatever it is, and you want it to taste and compare it to a French Cabernet or French Merlot, you can't afford to buy a $1,600 French barrel, but you can afford to use these staves and chips and other products as a way to get that same maturation at a more economic way. And so for spirits, tequila and rum, there really aren't any rules about oak aging. Most people do use used barrels to age rum and tequila, but you don't have to. And so what we can provide to that side of the spirits business is new oak, and that allows them to be more economic with their maturation program, and it allows them to get there faster because it's new oak, it's not used oak, and it's more consistent because you don't know what you're getting when you get a used barrel from barrel to barrel. They're all different. One might be drier, one might be wetter, one might leak. I mean, you just don't necessarily know. And used barrels are really hard to come by right now, as are new barrels, as you know, all the distillers.
Which is why you're getting all the calls, right?
Yeah, it's certainly a big part of it. Yeah, people are really having a hard time finding both new and used barrels. So on that side of it, it's just about regular maturation. And then on the bourbon and rye side, it's really about finishing. Like you said, you brought up finishing. It's a way to finish a bourbon or a rye that allows you to not go through the cost of dumping, rebarreling, re-racking, the cost of that second barrel, whether it's new or used. And some guys, use new, some have used, and then putting it back up on in the rick house for 6 months, because we're using new oak and we have the ability to use what we call enhanced seasoning oak, which we've partnered up with a company called River Drive up in Maine. And this guy has found a proprietary way to put natural flavors into our oak cubes and chips and staves, so that he can, if you want a honey or a sherry or maple or brown sugar or port, tequila, rum, you name the flavor, he's got a way by using alcohol or spirits as a vector to put the natural flavoring into the wood. The spirit comes out at the end of the process. And so you've just got flavor and new oak, either French or American, that you can then put either directly into a barrel to get that same double oak aging without another barrel, or you can even put it into a tote or a tank prior to going to the bottling line, which again is a very simple way to add that maturation, which a lot of the people we're partnering with are doing. Some guys did it on Monday, as a matter of fact, and you're able to get that consistent taste profile year after year instead of worrying about, well, where did these barrels come from? Are they too dry? How long is it going to take for me to really get this? It becomes almost more innovative and scientific to a certain degree. It's still the art of what the distiller wants it to taste like at the end of the day, but
Sure.
Lee, that's a pretty amazing journey from where you started to where you are now, and the wealth of knowledge that you bring to all of this through that process is pretty impressive and amazing. So, what has that been like, transitioning from where you were to now being at Innerstave and just the different types of business that you're dealing with now?
Well, I think whenever you go from a big multinational corporation to a smaller, more nimble business, it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's really exciting. I don't spend all day making PowerPoints and making executive committee presentations. I pick up the phone, we talk about something, and we can usually get it done pretty quickly. So these guys are very adept at making changes quickly as needed. An example would be, I am getting a lot of calls about woods other than American and French oak. So can you get Mizunura? Can you get Brazilian oak? Can you get Yugoslavian oak? And so we've, immediately just started making phone calls trying to find out how to get good sources of that you can get on a regular basis, not just sort of one-off. So, we're able to be pretty responsive and innovative. Where big companies, and I loved my 23 years at Brown-Forman. I'm not taking anything away from that, but it's kind of a breath of fresh air to be able to pivot pretty quickly and make decisions, in an hour instead of a year.
So I do have one other question. What's one of the more unique requests that you've received so far through this process?
Jim just mentioned honey, so I've got to go back and figure out if we can get a good source for honey, which is a great idea and one I hadn't thought of. And the other one, somebody, I think just last week, they tested our tequila and really, really liked it and said, why don't you start doing some mezcal? And I hadn't really thought of mezcal. I love mezcal, but it's such a kind of a small category. I didn't really think of it as a finishing for bourbon or for tequila or for anything. So we've got to go get our R&D guys to kind of test that one out a little bit and see what.
I guess the sky's the limit, right? I mean, you can do just about anything if somebody has to come up with the idea.
Oh, I got a request from Seoul, Korea, from a soju maker that wanted to see if we had coffee infused oak, because the Seoul, Korea has more coffee houses than any city in the world.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So we're working on that one too.
There you go. It's very, very interesting. So, in a nutshell, let's just sort of summarize for our listeners here. Innerstave manufactures wood products that are used for adding flavor to spirits and wine and whatever.
And beer.
And those wood products come in a number of formats that fit into containers to give a more economical way of applying a finish to a whiskey, and a more predictive and accurate way, right? I mean, it seems to me like you have this thing you call new barrel effect, right? What is that? What it's called?
New barrel equivalent.
New barrel equivalent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I received samples from you, they had instructions with them, and it said, if you want 50% new barrel equivalent, or if you want 100% new barrel equivalent, this is what you do. Step 1, step 2, and so forth. That kind of hand-holding is important to a distillery that hasn't done this before, or a winery or somebody else. And it's a predictive result, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I'm going to have to go back and tape this podcast after it airs, because Jim, you just explained it better than I did in like 5 minutes.
Well, I just wanted to summarize it for the listeners. They're like, oh, now what do they do?
No, there is hand-holding, and there is, look, the spirits business in all forms is pretty traditional, pretty slow moving, especially in bourbon is a pretty slow moving traditional. We've been making it this way for 200 years. Why would we ever make it a different way or do something different to it? And so, while everyone that I've talked to has been interested, eager to test, they've also been a little slower to go like, oh yeah, I'm all in. Now, some of the craft guys who are going, I'm having a hard time getting barrels, and are similar to Innerstave in size and want to get to market soon and start building a brand and building a business, they're generally a lot more willing to say, yeah, let's jump on board and at least get, maybe not our main expression, but let's do a couple different expressions and get them out there.
Well, the idea of introducing a non-barrel wood product into a barrel, this is something that has been around for a while, certainly. You said it's been around for years in the wine industry, but just in the bourbon world, let's talk about that for a little bit. Maker's 46, that whole line of products that comes out of Maker's Mark is all about the inside staves that are used in the barrel to add that variety that they have, that wonderful variety. And some of it's French oak, some of it's American oak, some of it's different toast levels and so forth. They do it, right? And
Right.
Then we've got Broken Barrel, our friend Seth out at Broken Barrel in California there. He busts up barrels and adds them to the settling tank so that he can add flavor, because he knows that the outside of that wood stave has never seen bourbon before, and it's got a job to do, and it can still do it. So there's a lot of that going on already in a way. And this is just a more exact and a more calculating way of getting it done. I think those people, the ones that are listening right now, hopefully are going to hear what we're saying and say, well, you know what? This makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, Maker's Mark was a leader in this for sure. Broken Barrel, Bardstown Bourbon Company had one. They came out with one last year, and they were even, they were transparent enough to say, we're putting 5 staves in this barrel and 7 in this one. I mean, they got very specific on it, which we love. I mean, we think it's great that people are transparent about what they're doing, because I think consumers want to know, and consumers also appreciate that you're maybe being a little more thoughtful about how you're getting to the final taste profile that you're trying to get to.
Absolutely. I almost forgot about our friend out at 291 Distillery in Colorado. He's putting aspen in, right? Aspen into the barrels.
That's right.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll have some aspen products.
We're working with the guy down in Texas, and we're still in the testing phase, so we'll have to see how it ends up. But he was able to get Texas post oak, and he's shipped that out to our facilities in Napa. And he's pretty excited about the idea of doing Texas oak finishing for Texas whiskey, because everything's better in Texas, right? So
yeah. Well, then soon the pecan will follow, I think. So, it's big in Texas too.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. It's so interesting. I mean, this is just, it's almost like, I don't want to say like it's upsetting. It's upsetting, meaning it will upset the industry a little bit. It will change the way things are done. I think that more people will say, because this is a money saver, right? I mean, this is there's a certain cost to getting a used barrel, and there's a big demand for them. So they're at a premium. And when you can get something like this, that's not a barrel, a little more availability, possibly at a better price.
Yeah, Jim, I'd say rather than upsetting, we try to say disruptive.
Disruptive. They're synonyms, right?
That's right. They
Is that right? Am I getting my English right? Is synonym the right word?
They're synonyms. That's correct.
Okay.
That's right. No, it is more cost effective. It is more readily available. And we haven't talked about this yet, and we don't have to dig into it too much, but it's also more sustainable, because if you think about one oak tree, say you cut down an 80-year-old oak tree, you're going to get 1 or 2 barrels worth of staves out of that tree. The rest of the wood's going to go on for a different use. But that same tree, because we can use so much more of the wood on the formats we're creating, we can use 15 new barrel equivalencies out of that same tree that would have gotten you 1 or 2 barrels. So there's a sustainability aspect to it as well. And that's, again, something that consumers are thinking about these days.
So just to sort of boil it down a little bit again for the listeners, when you have a barrel, the whiskey only gets to see the inside of the barrel.
True.
And with your product, it sees all sides of the wood. So it's exposed to much more surface area. Is there kind of a number you use? Is it like 6 times, 8 times, 100 times more?
So we do talk about it in new barrel equivalencies. So it's what the distiller wants. So if they want a lot of the ones folks we're working with right now, they really like a 50% new barrel equivalency for finishing. So we'll do that. We can do 100%. We can do 200%. So at some point, you're adding so much oak that you're going to get astringency and
sure
and over oaking a product, which you can certainly do. So we try to find that sweet spot. With the micronized oak, you can use a very little, because it's the smaller you get in format, the more surface area you get. So you can use very little, 1/4 of a pound in a barrel, and you get almost a new equivalence of a new barrel out of it. And in a very short period of time.
This is exciting stuff. This really does gets me thinking. Well, we're up on our break. I guess we've got 2 types of listeners out there. We got the listeners out there that have their home bar and they just love bourbon and they're thinking, what does this mean to me? And then we've got our listeners who are involved in the industry, who are maybe running a distillery or part of a distillery or work with a distillery, and they're thinking, yeah, I can see this application. And you've got an answer for both those people, I think. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the second half. So, folks, stay with us. Definitely encourage you to check out seldomseenmaple.com. That's Seldom Seen Farms. Kevin and his staff there are doing a fantastic job. And like we said at the beginning of the show, they've got a 5,000 maple tap operation. They're a first-generation farm with a passion to produce the very best maple products available. They've won so many awards, and they have a very special, unique aging method for their syrup and for their barrel-aged coffee. They provide quality at a very affordable price. They're not a maple factory or a co-packer. Kevin and his staff there are farmers with a passion for maple. Like I said before, Kevin is a bourbon enthusiast. He's not just a paid sponsor. He's a friend of the show. He's a roadie, and he loves helping roadies get down the bourbon road. Make sure you check out seldomseenmaple.com. They're constantly producing great bourbon-aged maple syrups using barrels from the very best distilleries. They also return those barrels to the distilleries afterwards. Distilleries like New Riff, Leaper's Fork, Treaty Oak Distilling, the Bard Distillery, Pine Bluffs Distilling, Mystic Farm and Distillery, J. Riger, so many more to come. Kevin and his staff there are just spreading the love, spreading the maple syrup, making it happen. And at the end of the day, those barrels that age that maple syrup get refilled with some wonderful bourbon and make some great maple finished bourbon whiskey. How awesome is that? Definitely check out seldomseenmaple.com. Get you some. All right, listeners, we are back. Just a recap of the last half. We have Lee Tatum in the house from Innerstave. We drank through a little bit of the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond in the first half. You know what? We've got Evan Williams Bottle and Bond again in the second half. But this is a special one. We actually added some of your product to it, Lee. And we decided to take your French oak medium toast with a maple influence and add one full 100% new barrel equivalent to it. And it's been aging for 10 days in a 750 ml bottle. So I bought 2 bottles, actually. I bought 2 bottles of the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. I took one of them and I added 6 cubes that you gave me as a sample. Aged it for 11 days now. And that's what's in our glass now. And I have to say, Brian, what did you think when we opened that bottle? What did it do to the room?
So as soon as the bottle was opened, clearly maple flavor, smell just filled the room. It was clear that that's what jumped out. But then when it was poured into the glass, we got a little bit of a change there. It wasn't as overpowering.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Lee, maybe you can comment on that, because I was a little worried at first that it would be too much, right?
Right. Yeah. So as we talked about earlier, when you added 6, you're getting 100% new barrel equivalency. So that's over that 10 days. It's like having an entire maple barrel inside of that 750. I have found that with the maple, especially, you get a lot of maple up front in the early days. And then as you leave it in a little bit longer, maybe 2 weeks, the oak will start to catch up with the maple, and it'll start to provide a more even or balanced flavor, so that you'll be able to, I can't wait to try this now, but I bet it'll be pretty exciting to try it in another 10 days.
Yeah, I think, I'm definitely going to do it. We'll have that bottle and we'll revisit it, and maybe we'll do an extra post on it once we hit, couple of more weeks, maybe closer to a month, and we'll just report on it and say, hey, this is where we are today with this. And it's amazing, the transformation, or it's, whatever it is, we'll report on it. But I'm excited to try this. We haven't tasted it yet. We have nosed it, but we haven't really tasted it yet. So we all have a pretty good pour of this Evan Williams in our glass right now. We're in Glencairns, and this is the first time this stuff's seen air since the cubes were added. So it's definitely got a maple nose to it, but for me, it's the right amount. It's not overly done. Like when we first opened the bottle, I got a little nervous about it. I think seems to be the right amount. You feel like the whiskey has received that barrel influence. It's received that maple influence, but it's not too much.
I would agree with that. And I know one question that I have is understanding this has been in the bottle for 11 days now. And then you mentioned keeping it in for another 10 days or so to continue to let that change and bring some of the oak out. Is there a recommended time to stop that process and pull the cubes out?
You know, Brian, it's an art and a science, right? So we will always help people with recommendations as we look at what they're trying to achieve. But it does change over time. Now, of course, at some point, all the oak extracts out and you won't need it anymore. But that's a pretty decent period of time. And I think everybody I've worked with gets there to where they want to be in kind of a 6-month or less period. So we've been able to be very successful with getting to the right profiles, but even some in 6 weeks. So it's sort of a 6-week to 6-month kind of time frame, depending on just how much more color you want, how much more flavor you want to add. I mean, I tell you, in this one, I get the maple when I taste it, but I think because it was the French oak that you tested, I get a little, compared to what we just tried, maybe a little more cognac-y feel a little bit. That kind of took off some of the roughness of the original. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. And, you know, there's definitely an added sweetness here. Now, some of that obviously is coming from the maple influence, but some of it's also coming from the wood sugars of the toasted wood, right?
Right.
And those come out pretty quick into the liquid.
Yes.
So that and the maple kind of express themselves right away. And then it's the deeper elements of the oak that takes time.
It takes a little more time, and then kind of pulls back the maple a little bit so that it's just a little more balanced, I think.
Man, this doesn't taste like a $20 bottle of whiskey. I have to be honest with you. It tastes like something that is, that's been treated very professionally, been treated very well. It's been introduced to a secondary barrel aging that is just phenomenal. And to get that in 11 days just blows my mind. And I guess it just mellows out over time, right? If you let it go too long, you get the bitterness, but
right. If you let it go too long, you might get a little more stringency. So it's one to keep an eye on. But I feel like, another 10 days and you might be surprised at how much different it is again.
Yeah. So our listeners are thinking, okay, so I know where to get the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond, but where do I get these oak cubes? How can I make this myself?
Yeah. So it's super interesting. When I joined, which, again, a short year ago, obviously we've just been focused on, in my side of the business, on distilleries, some breweries, but mostly distilleries, obviously. And there are two things for those guys. One comment I wanted to make that we didn't get to earlier was that about half of the bourbon and rye on the market is sourced. So if you're a brand owner or you're a master distiller or you're starting a new distillery, how do you do something to that bourbon to make it different than everybody else's that's on the market? Because most of them are from the same place and with the same mash bill. So you've got to do something. And I think this provides a way to differentiate yourself from the competition so that you can help justify why you're at this price point or that price point or whatever. Now that's for distilleries. For consumers, we are just now, and I'm talking about like literally, I think this week or last week, introducing cask cubes is what we're calling them, that will be available for consumers. So I think people at home can really have fun becoming their own master blender, because now they can take a couple cubes of American or French and take their favorite bourbon, or maybe not their favorite bourbon, and see what they can turn it into and share with their friends and say, look, I made this. This is what it tasted like when it started, and this is what I did to it, and this is what it tastes like now. And we'll have enough. It's enough for 2 750s for, I believe it's 100% new barrel oak, and it's $12 per package, and you get to take that home and become your own master distiller, master blender, I guess is a better way to put it. And eventually over time, we'll have all the flavors that we've been talking about right now. But for now, it's just the American and the French and a couple different toast levels. But eventually we'll be able to do the sherry and port and maple that we're tasting today, and brown sugar and all the rest. And we're super excited about it, because we've never thought about being really in the direct to consumer business. But I think it was on TikTok that we saw other people get their hands on our samples, however they got them, and started posting videos of them doing it, and realizing that, hey, this is something people want.
Sure.
And people might really have fun trying out.
Well, I know the gears are turning, right? People are thinking, oh yeah, I can do that. And, every year we do a blending contest from our listeners where they send in blends that they've done on their own. And we have a master taster come in and join the host of the show, and we do we judge it. We judge it, and we have a winner, and it's a lot of fun. Our good friend Jason Calori over at the Mash and Drum, he's got a YouTube channel. He does Blend-A-Geddon every year on his show, and it's a big deal. Now, both these have already been done for 2022, so 2023 is a new year, and I'm thinking that our listeners are going, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to win, the Bourbon Road Blending Challenge. I mean, this is how I'm going to win Blend-A-Geddon on the Mash and Drum. I think the gears are turning. People are thinking about this. So you're exactly right. A few of your samples got out. A few people realized the impact it would have on their, there's just having fun with bourbon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think it's pretty exciting, and it's once people try it, they're going to tell a lot of other people, and it'll get its own life. But like I said, it's brand new. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to the Innerstave TikTok or Instagram or the website, and there'll be more information. It'll send you in the right direction.
So you guys are TikToking now, huh?
We are. I'm not, but we are.
Yeah.
I guess I better start.
You better get going. You don't want to get behind the curve,
That's
right?
right.
Absolutely. Well, this is great stuff. I'm excited about it. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was this desire to have an American oak honey finish. Honey finishes are they're booming right now. I mean, people love it. And can I get a sample?
I'm gonna get you some honey. It's on my list.
All right. Well, I'm still sipping on this, and I'm telling you right now, this is an elevated expression of Evan Williams Bottle and Bond whiskey. Anything, Brian, that you can think of on this that's kind of an odd effect that it gets?
For me, it really is just a totally different experience with this bottle. I mean, it really takes it to another level. When you compare the two, I really don't think, there's a way to connect the two together. It had a pretty big change to the overall flavor profile. And I am excited to taste it again in another 10 days to see what that impact has had on the bottle compared to, right now we definitely do have much more maple, definitely a little bit more sweet.
Yeah.
That pops out. I know one comment that was made, I'm ready to eat some pancakes.
Yeah.
So, it's a very interesting transition from where we were on the first part of the show to now. And it's very good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, I don't want to take away from it. I feel like it's elevated.
Here's going to be my real world honest comment. All right. The very first impression of this is, wow, what an amazing immediate effect this has on the product we added it to. But here's my negative comment on it. It's all up front on the palate right now. So the back end's yet to come. And I think we're going to see that maybe develop over the next few weeks as the oak comes to play. And we start to see the back end of your palate get impressed by this oak addition. Right now, it's just all up front. But, up front's where you get surprised, right? You get surprised up front on your palate.
Right.
And on your nose. And on the nose, it's the biggest impact. And I'm pretty excited about this. So what would you say is what's the biggest demand on your product? Is it wine finish? Is it straight oak? Is it, French oak finish? Is it American oak toasted? What's the biggest demand on your product?
Right now, honestly, it's the American oak medium toast and medium plus toast. Because, honestly, that's the one that most mimics what happens if you're double barreling with a regular American oak barrel. So that's the most in demand right now. The second most in demand is sherry.
Okay.
There's a lot of interesting demand for sherry because, again, a little bit of a lack of getting sherry barrels. Prices have gone up, and it's more the consistency thing, right? I know I can do it year after year and get the exact same flavor profile. There's going to be a variation if you're using used barrels.
Now, do you have a bourbon barrel cube?
We do have straight bourbon. Yeah,
straight bourbon. So I guess you're talking to Scottish distilleries a little bit here and there.
So we don't talk to Irish or Scotch because their rules are such that you cannot add anything into a barrel.
So yeah,
or even after
Jim here,
even after you've emptied the barrel. So for now, until necessity breeds invention, or whatever the phrase is, the mother of invention. When they get to the point that they can't get barrels, somebody's going to have a necessity that needs to be fixed. And so I'm not writing Scotland and Ireland off. I love both those places. But for now, it's not my focus is not trying to get laws changed in foreign countries. I've got enough other stuff to do.
Well, American single malts are certainly your customer, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's, we'll see where that category grows. It's certainly getting a lot of media attention.
Well, we know from past history that the Irish, when they were being taxed for their malts by the King of England, they came up with single pot still whiskeys, which included unmalted barley, right, to try and get around the king's tax. So they're not altogether unwilling to change. It just depends on, what it's costing them. So when barrels get too expensive, they're going to give you a call, I think.
Yeah, they'll figure it out eventually.
That's pretty amazing. Well, Lee, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. We want to make sure that we give you a chance to let our listeners know where they can find you on social media, on the internet. Where's your store at? Because, eventually they're going to come and find your product for personal use on your website. Where can they find you guys?
Yeah, so for consumers who want to give this a try, they can go to our TikTok, Instagram. Just look up at Innerstave. You can go to our website directly and find everything there. If you're a distiller and you're looking for me, I'm at lee@innerstave.com, or you can go to the website and there's a ugly picture of me somewhere on there with my contact info.
And I'll put this in there. Anybody out there that wants to to meet Lee or be connected with Lee at any point is welcome to reach out to Brian or I at team@thebourbonroad.com. We'll be sure to put you in contact with Lee. If you're a distillery and you're thinking, wow, this is something that's something we want to try, something we want to give a shot, and we'll be happy to hook you up. It's all about networking in this business, right? Right, Brian?
That's right. And I would definitely encourage everybody to check out Innerstave on TikTok and Instagram, Facebook as well. Those are all great places to connect and learn a little bit more in addition to what you've heard today.
So thank you guys for having me on. It's been really fun talking about this, and it's been great, getting to see your all's reactions to what we're up to. My whole team's out in California. I'm the lone guy in Kentucky, and I loved the chance to chat with people about it.
Yeah, I'm completely blown away. I mean, I thought this secondary barrel aging thing was like a long, drawn out process. I didn't realize that the effects can be so immediate, that you can get such an immediate impact on your product. I'm blown away by it. And Lee, you're disrupting the business. That's for sure. You're definitely going to have a lot of people calling you up, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to do a little bit more of my own testing with it as well. Thank you again for coming on the show. We appreciate it. We hope that you'll come on again in the future. Give us an update. Tell us what else new you have going on.
Absolutely. But I'd love to.
All right. Well, you can find the Bourbon Road on all social medias. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on our private Facebook group called the Bourbon Roadies. We've got 3,000 members on there, just going strong. They love to share bourbon information. They love to share pictures and outings and family events. It's just a good group of people. We're very careful to keep it nice and let's say no trolls in the group, right? We don't allow that to happen. We got a couple moderators that keep it clean and keep you guys, anybody that's coming in to slam somebody for drinking from the bottom shelf, I just tell you right now, that's not going to happen. That's why we're 3,000 members and we're not 30,000 members, because we don't let those guys stick around too long. It's a safe place. Come join us. We'd love to have you there. You just got to answer 3 questions. Do you like bourbon? Are you 21? And do you agree to play nice? Because we don't tolerate any rudeness in that group. We'd love to have you in there. We do a show every single week where we have a bourbon industry expert on. Sometimes we'll have a country music star. Sometimes we'll have a chef on. Sometimes an author. We got an author coming up here real soon. Pretty excited about that, Brian. We try to mix it up as much as possible. We're always drinking whiskey. We're always talking about the whiskey, always tasting the whiskey and giving you notes. Check out our social medias. Follow us on everything we do. In fact, you're listening to us right now. Go into that app you're listening to us on and subscribe. Every time we release an episode, you'll get that bell notification. It'll let you know it's happening, and you won't miss one. We love to hear from our listeners. You can reach out to Brian and I any single day of the week. You can reach him at brian@thebourbonroad.com. I'm Jim at thebourbonroad.com. We together, including Tyler, are team at thebourbonroad.com. You can reach out to us anytime. We will get back with you. We'd love to hear your suggestions for a show or a bottle we should have on. We always respect our listeners and the ideas that they have. Make sure you reach out to us and let us know what you think about the show. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It always helps, gets us through those doors. Until then, we will see you down the Bourbon Road.